Welcome to the Nonprofits. And in this segment, we're going to discuss a Christian who is making the suggestion that maybe other Christians should quit using the word faith. Now, I find this interesting because I kept thinking, well, one crazy thing down, how many more to go? But on a more serious note, Damian, what do you have here for us?
For this next segment, we are going to discuss an article posted on the Stand to Reason website on the 1st of August from Christian apologist Greg Koukl, titled, "It's Time to Forget Faith." In this article, Koukl no longer wants Christians to use the word faith when it comes to their faith, because the usage of the word faith to indicate a belief without sufficient evidence is only about 100 years old and is used by prominent atheists like Bill Maher, Richard Dawkins, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. So what does Koukl want believers to use instead? He wants believers to assert to atheists, "We don't have faith, we have confident convictions based on good reasons." But does Koukl's train of thought stand to reason? Let's ask the panel.
Well, I've got to say that when I heard that, Damian, the first thing that I thought is if they want to tell me that, great, pick me, please. Let's talk about it. What do you think that is? You think that's going to be an effective way to shut down the argument that your faith is blind faith?
Not really, because I think as soon as you try say, we have, because in the last sentence of his article, it says there, force the revisionists to address the evidence. That is something I and most other atheists would happily do in a heartbeat. I want to get into these debates, discussions about the evidence, because as someone who was a former believer, who used to be like very much on the Greg Koukl, Frank Turek, Jay Warner Wallace, Lee Strobel bandwagon, as someone who has believed and then evaluated the evidence, I personally don't think the evidence for God or for Jesus Christ being the Son of said God is there. So I think, let's address the evidence. But
I'm with you, because it's been my experience that oftentimes when I'm talking about to Christians, they want to discuss anything other than their reasons for believing. They want to discuss evolution. They want to discuss the Big Bang. They want to discuss all kinds of things. And usually they don't know the subject well enough to even really have that discussion. But as I often tell them, I don't have an altar to Darwin. I don't pray in the name of evolution. We pray at the beginning of my meals to make sure everything's okay. So you can take evolution, you can take the Big Bang, cosmology, and throw it completely away, and it still has absolutely no bearing on my faith, or my lack of faith, more accurately. Now, Aaron, what do you think about this idea of the 3 pillars of active trust? Exactly how well do you think Christianity lives up to those expectations?
Well, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's still the same thing, right? It doesn't matter if you rebrand faith to active trust. It's still the same thing, because you still don't have a good reason to believe what you believe. Why do I know? Because I used to be Christian. And I realized one day over a thinking process and a discovery process, I had no good reason to believe in the Christian faith. Wow. And he makes up these 3 pillars. What are they? Reliable evidence, right? Reliable witnesses, rational reflection, and convincing proofs. Okay, sure, that sounds somewhat reasonable. Unfortunately, there's no reliable witnesses to the New Testament stories, right? From what I understand, the youngest piece of the New Testament are letters from Paul. They predate even the Gospels. And then we have the Gospels, and according to scholars, Matthew and Mark, I believe. Mark was the first one. And there's 2 of the Gospels, I can't remember it's Mark and one of the other ones. They are actually based on another unknown manuscript that we don't have called Q. That's most scholars believe there's an unknown Gospel called Q that that 2 of the Gospels were based on. And then you have John, the final Gospel, and these came out 70 to 120 years after Jesus died, and they're supposedly contain firsthand accounts, and they contradict each other. Bible, not reliable witnesses, not full of the reliable witnesses you think they are. So they're myths as far as we can tell. And rational reflection and convincing proofs, yes, that's what we want. As Damian said, we want rational reflection and we want convincing proofs, and we just don't see it. I listen to the other ACA shows every week, and people call in and they say, these are my reasons for believing, and nobody's ever given a rational reason or a convincing proof. So I'm still over here not believing in God. You know, when it comes down to, I think there are two reasons people believe in religion. One, it's what they were taught, and two, everybody around them believes it. That's why people believe in religion.
If I can add something here as well, it seems that Greg Koukl has a bee in his bonnet about the fact that usage and meanings of words change over time. But, you know, because in his article, he literally mentioned that gay would no longer mean happy. Gay is forever tied to being homosexual. And it's like, well, Greg, this is what language and culture does. It changes, it ebbs, it flows.
Oh, without a doubt. And, you know, Aaron, one of the things you mentioned is that you're talking about the Q document. That theory has fallen a little out of favor in the last 10 or 15 years. But even so, you're absolutely right in the fact that Matthew is essentially someone taking Mark, the first book written, and it's so much of it's literally almost, if they had word processing programs, then it was so many of the scriptures are almost verbatim copy paste of each other with just more details. And of course, understanding specializing Matthew was going to a Jewish audience. That was its goal. So therefore, he included things that would embellish it for his audience, which only makes sense. And Luke is very similar as well. There's a lot of copying over into Mark from Luke, but Luke had more of a Gentile reach, so it didn't do what Mark did. But yes, they're still all coming from a common source, except John. John's a little different, but even so, it's still a lot of repackaging. But that's really what we see in religion in general, even repackaging pagan beliefs and things like that. Now,
what's more likely? What's the more likely explanation? That there's a God giving different messages to different people who are then we don't know, or it's people trying to get out the most convincing message they can so people believe what they want them to believe.
Clearly,
but at that time, there was a lot of oral tradition going on. And like you said, Aaron, maybe that Q source could have been somebody who was just passing down oral tradition and probably passed it down to more than one person, you know, Mark and Matthew.
There are a bunch of different versions of Christianity that came out in the first century that were eventually fell by the wayside. But there's more there's a book called Lost Christianities by Bart Ehrman. Go read that book. We could be practicing a very different version of Christianity if a different version had won.
Without a doubt, this is the Roman Catholic franchise won the war in the early war and got to pick which books we're going to use and how we're going to interpret them. And of course, so much of Christianity, regardless of what franchise you belong to, is really so much of the belief itself is extra biblical. It's not even funny. But AJ, I wanted to switch to you, and I know that Greg seems to take the words of famous atheists as inaccurate when it comes to Christianity. What is he talking about there?
Yeah, a quick note though, there are actually 45,000 denominations of Christianity. But anyways, he's actually blaming famous atheists like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins for ruining the word faith with statements like, faith is the purposeful suspension of critical thinking. And I completely have to agree with those statements. I think it was Bjorn Maher that said that one. So he argues that reliable witnesses can be good enough evidence for faith. And because apparently writing and saying something automatically turns it into the truth. And it's like what Aaron was just talking about. Like you can't rely on these witnesses because they're written down in a paper. When you go to court and you have a witness and you say, okay, I was at this place at this time, you have to corroborate that with actual physical evidence. You can't just say that and then they take it as your word.
You know.
Indeed. Indeed. I've
Yeah.
noticed that with Christian apologetics, there's this idea that no one in early Christianity ever lied or was ever mistaken about anything. Everything that they said and everything that they wrote was the 100% truth. But every other religion, all of their authors and all of their prophets, all of them are wrong. But no one in Christianity is ever wrong.
Yeah, well, that would sum it up. So, Aaron, I wanted to go to you. The attempt to sanitize faith by what I felt was a rebranding as trust or conviction, is this just a superficial solution to engage with people and avoiding the deeper issues surrounding belief in what Christians call evidence? Is it just trying to, rebrand Christianity and make spin?
I think, yeah, it's totally rebranding so they don't get caught, with their pants down, so to speak. We live in the information age. And so anybody in their church can go and get on YouTube and start watching videos. They can take philosophy classes. They can read philosophy books for free online. They can figure out and start to think skeptically and with reason. And it's killing churches because there's no evidence for believing in the gods of Christianity. It's just as likely that Zeus is a god or Thor is a god or any of the other ones around the world, right? And so all he's trying to do is he's trying to make his faith sound more reasonable. He's trying to make his faith sound like it's supported by evidence, that it's based. Oh, no, it's based on reliable witnesses. Oh, no, it's based on rational reflection. Oh, no. I have convincing proofs, right? And so it's like people that are against. It's like these. I probably can't say, but sometimes when you're out in the political sphere, there are groups that are against certain causes. But then they have a name that's exactly the opposite of the cause that they're supposedly, like People for Liberty, and they want to send everybody to jail or something like that, right? And so just because you use rational and skeptical and scientifically sounding words doesn't change the fact that underneath those words there's no foundation.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Greg, if we were to invent a word that encapsulates the notion of an idea that is believed without sufficient evidence, what would that word be?
Christianity. No.
Or why not just use the word that everyone knows has come to encapsulate the idea of belief without sufficient evidence? Because to me, this is like he's just. I think it was Aaron who said he's just trying to essentially rebrand Christianity. It's not so much. It's a bit like the anti-abortion argument. It's not anti-abortion. It's pro-life. In the same state that executes people at a high rate,
Your religion is going to require faith by definition. So I don't understand why people just don't lean into it and say, "Yeah, I have faith. I don't have any good reason, but I have faith that is true." Isn't that the whole point of your religion? Is that you believe it even though there is no evidence for it? So,
I would like to ask Greg. Like let's say a flat earther comes to him and says, Or he could say, I have faith that the flat earth is true. Or he could say, I have evidence like reliable witnesses, rational reflection, and convincing proofs that the flat earth is true. What would Greg Koukl say to that? Does this guy have, actual proof that the earth is flat, or does he have faith that the earth is flat?
This is a question I always ask, theists when I have discussions with them. And I tell them, okay, you believe in the one God. I don't believe in one more God than the one that you do. Like there are 17,000 God claims that they don't believe in. To me, it's just one more. Like that's it.
Yes,
that's what it comes down to.
AJ, I think you hit it, perfectly. In fact, I think you all did, because this is a rebrand. This is trying to avoid admitting that they don't have good reasons. But how effective do you think this is really going to be when somebody, AJ, I'm coming to you, how effective do you think this is going to be when somebody reads this article and goes, oh yeah, I've got it. I got it figured out. I'm going to go to work or I'm going to go to school or I'm going to whatever. And I'm going to put that atheist in their place. I'm going to show them that I have trust in for good reasons and use words like conviction and avoid faith and try to to shift some type of prove me wrong kind of situation? How do you think that's going to work out for him?
I mean, he was complaining that the modernization of the word faith, but in the same breath, he was saying that words sometimes outlive their usefulness. And this is when he used the example that the word gay no longer means cheerful, that now it refers to homosexuality. And I couldn't help but laugh and imagining him sobbing, like claiming that happy gay is gone for good.
No more happy gay.
Yeah. But the most ironic part is that while he was trying to prove that the Oxford definition of faith makes no mention of faith as blind, he asked people to begin using these alternative words, including convictions. The problem is that the Oxford Dictionary definition for convictions is a strong belief. And in turn, the Oxford definition for belief is any proposition that is accepted as true on the basis of inconclusive evidence. So there you go, inconclusive evidence. You don't have evidence. He literally rounded right back to make it mean exactly what he was trying to avoid. So great fucking job, Greg. Maybe actually read the dictionary next time.
Well, I know that it's often enough that Christians can't even manage to read all their Bible. So I think you're asking a little too much for them with the 21,000 pages in the Oxford Dictionary that he mentioned. And he mentioned that it had no reference to faith as belief without evidence, but it felt like a distraction. He calling the claims in the Bible evidence is problematic on its best day. But Damian, why do you think he spent his time complaining about words and definitions rather than just whipping out his Bible and using those thousands of pages of what he would call evidence to demonstrate that he had a good reason for it? Wouldn't that have been a better use of his time than just doing word games?
Well, look, to me, religion is a lot like politics in that it's essentially a war for hearts and minds, in that, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, but yeah, it's not so much that they don't want you to think, they want you to feel. And so, yeah, if you can give the impression that, I suppose it's like the ultimate sales job. If you can convince your customer that this particular product is, reliable, doesn't cost a lot, will give you a whole lot of benefits, absolutely no problems. Yeah. And so the way you do that is sometimes by obfuscation, by like using weasel words, by changing definitions slightly, by shifting the goalposts, all that kind of stuff. And so yes, I think as I said, this just seems to be a rebranding, not so much for us as unbelievers, but more trying to get current believers to try reframe how they look at how they engage with non-believers. And so if they, as Greg said, force the revisionists. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call us revisionists. If we use like 120-year-old word for something, does that make us a revisionist, or does that make him a revisionist by telling people not to use the 120-year-old definition of a word that everyone knows means the thing that he doesn't want it to mean?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there with this sounds like and feels like a way to create a little comfort and confidence and maybe keep some of those butts in the seat, because church attendance has been falling for decade and a half, close to 20 years now. And they're not going to survive at this rate unless they modify. And with that in mind, I was wondering, Aaron, did you have any takes or any thoughts you wanted to add to this?
No, the religion is just like any other group of people that get together. If you want to survive, you're going to have to adapt. And if you look at the history of religion, they've been adapting from the beginning. They always change with the times. They're behind the times, but they always will change with the times. As soon as those butts leave the seats, as soon as the money dries up, you can guarantee that religion, either a new religion will pop up to replace them, or the old religions will change and start accepting new doctrines, new beliefs, in order to get those butts those people back in the seats.
I think, we see a lot of that with the Catholic Church. They phased out limbo because, that was an uncomfortable doctrine, and they're getting a little squeamish about purgatory, and they're constantly readjusting and trying to create a new product.
Yeah,
and it's helpful.
I was raised Mormon, and the Mormons, you think that from an unerring God who's perfect, that you think you'd get the message out right the first time, but no, the Mormons used to practice polygamy, now they don't. Blacks weren't allowed to have the priesthood, now they do. The temple ceremony in the temples has changed a lot over the years. It's all about updating for modern times, and they're always behind the curve.
Yeah, they're always trying to keep up, and I agree. And before I close this, AJ, do you have anything you wanted to say?
I think what Damian said was excellently put. It's just all about comfort. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's called the appealing to emotion fallacy that they're trying to use to get people, to feel comfort from the whole doctrine.
I think this is a message he's trying to give to people that might be leaving. It's like, no, don't leave. It's not faith. It's not faith. It's reliable witnesses, rational reflection, and convincing proofs. I think he's trying to keep people in the seats. I think this message is for current believers to delay them leaving over this word faith.
I agree. I think this is just trying to rebrand, to get back on point, to remain relevant. Because when we look at Christianity, and everyone thinks that my church, my particular flavor is just like the apostles. And the truth is that when you start looking at, doctrines like the rapture, that's a relatively recent addition of the last 100 to 150 years. And you start looking at these different things, there are so many things that they have in their belief system that really is just a pure fabrication to fit somebody selling a product, a con man selling a product.
Look at Peter and Paul in the Bible. They didn't agree on doctrines. And I think there are also extra biblical sources where you can go and see that Peter and Paul, they preached a different form of Christianity than the other did.
And that's exactly why there are 45,000 denominations of Christianity. Each one is like, well, I don't like this one that you're doing, so we're just gonna make our new one that matches up with what we want.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is they're not even internally inconsistent. When you look at Christians and you speak to them, and I'm saying this as a former believer, not so much a Christian, but a believer. Having said that, they're not even consistent with themselves. One day in one situation, this is the case. In another day, something else happens. And what that really means, and then all the squirming and the revision begins. So I think that this is a case where I'm not so sure how successful he's going to be with this rebrand, but I do know that we have more for you to listen to. When you're ready, click here.